For many people with high rejection sensitivity, people-pleasing isn't really about being generous or easygoing. It's a strategy for controlling risk. If you can anticipate what someone wants and provide it before they even ask, you reduce the chance of ever being on the receiving end of their disappointment or disapproval. It feels, on some level, like a form of safety. The difficulty is that this strategy has a cost that compounds quietly over time. Constantly monitoring and adjusting to other people's moods is exhausting, and it teaches your own nervous system that your genuine preferences are less important than managing everyone else's potential reactions. Over months and years, people can lose real contact with what they actually want because the question stopped being asked. This pattern often gets praised too, which makes it harder to notice as a cost. Being endlessly accommodating and low maintenance reads as a virtue, so the people around you rarely have a reason to point out what it's costing you. That praise can quietly reinforce the strategy, even as it becomes more exhausting to sustain underneath. The deeper irony is that people-pleasing often doesn't even achieve its goal. Relationships built on constant accommodation tend to feel less secure over time, not more, because the other person can sense something isn't fully honest, even if they can't name what. Real security in a relationship comes from being known, including the parts that might occasionally disappoint someone, not from never risking disappointment at all. A distinctive feature of rejection sensitivity is the amount of mental energy spent rehearsing conversations before they happen, or replaying them afterwards, searching for the exact moment something went wrong. Difficult messages get drafted and redrafted. Feedback gets anticipated and preemptively defended against, sometimes days in advance. This over-preparation feels productive in the moment, like you're being careful, thorough, responsible. In reality, it's largely the nervous system trying to gain a sense of control over an outcome that hasn't happened yet and that you don't actually control, how someone else will feel or respond. The rehearsal doesn't change the other person's reaction, it just extends the discomfort backwards in time, so you experience the anxiety of the moment for hours or days before it even arrives, and often again afterwards. Breaking this pattern doesn't mean stopping preparation altogether. Some preparation is genuinely useful. It means noticing the point where preparation tips into rumination, when you're no longer gathering information to help you, but simply repeating the same worry on a loop, which is a sign the nervous system has taken over from the thinking mind. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, often shortened to RSD, describes an intense emotional response to real or perceived criticism or rejection, and it's especially common among people with ADHD, though it isn't formally listed as a diagnostic criterion on its own. Clinicians and researchers who work closely with ADHD describe it as one of the most impairing and least discussed parts of the condition. Sometimes more disruptive day to day than the attention difficulties people typically associate with ADHD. For someone with RSD, a piece of mild feedback can trigger a reaction disproportionate enough to be genuinely confusing to people around them. Sudden tears, intense anger, or a full afternoon lost to shame, all from something that objectively wasn't that serious. Because RSD isn't widely known outside ADHD circles, many people who experience it have spent years being told they're overreacting, without ever learning there's a recognized neurological explanation for what's happening. Knowing the term doesn't fix the reaction by itself, but it does something valuable. It moves the experience out of the category of personal failing and into the category of a known pattern with known, workable strategies, which for many people is the first moment the shame around it starts to lift. In professional settings, rejection sensitivity often produces two opposite-looking but related patterns. either avoiding feedback and difficult conversations entirely or seeking constant reassurance that everything is fine. Both come from the same underlying discomfort with uncertainty about where you stand. Someone might avoid asking a manager a necessary question because the question itself feels risky, or might repeatedly ask for confirmation that a piece of work was good enough, unable to simply trust a lack of complaints as sufficient information. Performance reviews and one-to-ones can become disproportionately stressful, not because the feedback itself is usually harsh, but because any feedback at all gets processed through the same threat system that responds to real rejection. This can lead to talented, capable people underselling themselves, avoiding visibility, or leaving roles that were actually going well, simply to escape the ongoing anxiety of being evaluated. It can also show up in subtler ways, like being unable to hear praise alongside constructive feedback. A review with 9 positive points and 1 suggestion for improvement gets remembered entirely as "they think I'm not good enough," with the 9 positives barely registering. This selective memory isn't a conscious choice. It's the threat system prioritizing the one piece of information that matched its expectation of danger. Over time, this can genuinely limit career growth, not through lack of ability, but through a pattern of avoiding exactly the situations, asking for a raise, pitching an idea, taking on visible responsibility, where growth usually happens. Recognizing this pattern is often the first step toward participating in those situations despite the discomfort, rather than waiting for the discomfort to disappear first. In close relationships, rejection sensitivity can create a particular kind of friction that's rarely discussed openly. The person with high rejection sensitivity may need more frequent reassurance, may react strongly to feedback intended gently, or may withdraw preemptively from conflict to avoid the risk of it escalating into rejection. Their partner or friend, mean-whole, may feel they're walking on eggshells, unsure which ordinary comments might land as a threat. Neither side is doing anything wrong here. This is simply what happens when one nervous system is running a heightened threat response and the other doesn't fully understand why. Left unexamined, this dynamic can create real distance. The sensitive partner feels perpetually at risk of disappointing someone, and the other partner feels perpetually careful, which is exhausting in its own way. Naming the pattern out loud, ideally outside of a moment of conflict, tends to help both sides more than almost anything else. It turns an invisible dynamic into a shared, workable problem. My reaction to that was bigger than the situation, and here's what's actually happening for me. Rather than leaving both people to privately and separately wonder what's going wrong. Every pattern covered in this video, the people-pleasing, the over-preparation, the reassurance-seeking, the withdrawal, shares a common root: trying to prevent rejection from happening at all, rather than building the capacity to survive it if it does. This is an understandable strategy, but it's ultimately an exhausting one, because it requires constant vigilance and can never fully succeed, since other people's reactions were never within anyone's control to begin with. The alternative isn't to stop caring about how you're perceived. It's to build enough genuine evidence, through small, repeated experiences, that disagreement, feedback, or even outright rejection are survivable, that they don't actually confirm the worst story your nervous system has been telling you. This shift happens slowly, through practice, not through a single moment of insight. Friday's video in this series moves fully into that practical territory, specific, realistic ways to build that evidence and start recalibrating the alarm without requiring you to somehow feel less deeply than you do. Recognizing these patterns this week is the necessary groundwork for that work to actually stick.